Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. We're going to be diving into a topic that's really important for UPSC aspirants:
Yeah, definitely.
social
It
justice.
is a big one.
And what better time to do this than right after the UN's World Day of Social Justice, which was just yesterday, February 20th.
Absolutely. And social justice is something that you're going to see pop up again and again in GS paper 2, governance, constitution, international relations. So it's definitely a good idea to have a good grasp of it. And for today's deep dive, we're going straight to the source that matters most for UPSC prep.
Yeah, the PIB.
The PIB. Okay, so the PIB is talking about empowering inclusion, bridging gaps of social justice, and highlighting some of India's initiatives.
Right.
I have to admit, I was really surprised to learn that India has a scheme specifically aimed at rehabilitating transgender individuals and those engaged in begging.
Yeah, that one caught my eye too. It's called Smile. And it's just one example of how India is working towards, a more just and equitable society.
But before we get into the specifics, I think it's important to kind of step back and understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, context is key.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this. What exactly is World Day of Social Justice? And why should a UPSC aspirant care, beyond just knowing the definition?
So at its core, World Day of Social Justice is all about promoting, these fundamental values that are really essential for a thriving society. Things like equality, human rights, fair opportunities for everyone. But for you as UPSC aspirants, it's crucial to understand how this global concept actually translates into real-world policies and impacts governance.
So it's not just a symbolic day, it has practical
Well,
implications.
exactly.
Yeah.
How countries operate, especially when it comes to things like social welfare and development.
That makes a lot of sense. But how did this day even come about? It seems like a relatively recent observance.
Yeah, it is. The UN General Assembly designated it back in 2007, and the International Labor Organization, or ILO, has really been a driving force behind it.
Speaking of the ILO, it seems like they're pretty invested in this whole social justice thing. Why is their role so significant in this context?
They've been really pivotal in shaping how we approach social justice in this increasingly interconnected world. In 2008, they released the Declaration on Social Justice for a Fair Globalization. And think of it as a roadmap for ensuring that economic growth doesn't come at the cost of social well-being, especially in the face of globalization.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between progress and fairness.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's bring it back home to India. Which ministry is spearheading the charge for social justice here?
In India, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, or MOSJE, is really the key player. They're the ones working to empower and uplift communities that are often marginalized or excluded.
MOSJE, the Champions for Social Justice.
Mhm.
But who exactly are they fighting for? Which groups are they focused on supporting?
Their mandate is quite broad, which really reflects the diverse social landscape of India. They work with scheduled castes, other backward classes, senior citizens, victims of substance abuse, transgender individuals, denotified and nomadic tribes, economically backward classes, and the economically weaker section.
Wow, that's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complex web of social issues that India is grappling with. But why is social justice so crucial, especially in today's world? Why should we care beyond just acknowledging that inequality exists?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it goes beyond just fairness. Within one country, think about it. When people feel excluded, when inequality is rampant, it breeds instability. The ILO's emphasis on social justice is really about preventing those breakdowns and fostering global peace.
So it's about recognizing that social justice isn't just an internal matter for individual nations.
Right.
It has ripple effects across the globe.
Exactly. And it ties in perfectly with the UN's broader goals of, decent, workfare, globalization, fundamental rights, and social protections. These are all pieces of the same puzzle.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we're starting to see the bigger picture here, but let's be real. Achieving social justice is a mammoth task.
Huge.
What are some of the biggest obstacles in the way?
I mean, we're still facing persistent global challenges like financial crises, insecurity, poverty, exclusion, and of course, deeply ingrained inequality. These are complex issues with no easy fixes.
Right, it's not like flipping a switch. It requires a systemic approach and long-term commitment.
Absolutely.
And bringing it back to the Indian context, we touched upon the Constitution earlier. How does it set the stage for social justice?
The Indian Constitution is actually a really powerful tool for promoting social justice. Right from the preamble, it emphasizes social, economic, and political justice, guaranteeing equality of status and opportunity and fostering fraternity.
So these aren't just lofty ideals. They're woven into the very fabric of the nation.
Exactly.
Are there any specific articles in the Constitution that really drive this point home?
Absolutely. When it comes to fundamental rights, Article 23 prohibits human trafficking and forced labor, and Article 24 bans child labor and hazardous occupations. You know, these articles draw a clear line against exploitation. Then you have the directive principles of state policy, which, while not enforceable by courts, guide the government in creating a just and equitable society.
Okay, so the directive principles are like guiding lights pointing the way towards social justice. Which of these principles are particularly relevant to our conversation today?
There are a few key ones to highlight. Article 38 directs the state to reduce social and economic inequalities, which is a huge undertaking. Article 39 focuses on ensuring equal livelihood, fair wages, and protection from exploitation.
So far, it seems like these articles are about establishing a level playing field
Yeah.
and protecting people from exploitation. What else is there?
Well, Article 39A is all about ensuring access to justice by guaranteeing free legal aid to those who can't afford it. And finally, Article 46 mandates special provisions for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and weaker sections to prevent discrimination and promote their advancement.
So it's about creating a system where everyone has a fair shot, regardless of their background. That's the constitutional foundation. But how does this translate into real-world action? What concrete steps has India taken to make social justice a reality?
India has a whole range of schemes and programs that are designed to address social and economic disparities. For example, there's PMAJY, the Pradhan Mantri Anusachit Jati Abhyuday Yojana, which specifically targets scheduled caste communities by supporting skill development, income generation, and village infrastructure.
So PMAJI is about empowering these communities from multiple angles, economically, socially, and in terms of basic infrastructure.
Precisely. And then there's SRE SHTA, the scheme for residential education for students in high schools and targeted areas. This one aims to provide quality education to SE students in classes 9-12 by funding top CBSE and state board schools.
It sounds like these initiatives are about breaking down those barriers to education and opportunity that have historically disadvantaged certain communities. What other schemes are out there?
Next, we have the Purple Fests, which are all about promoting inclusion and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, often referred to as Divyangjan in India.
I love that. It's not just about providing support, but also about shifting perceptions and fostering respect.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about changing the narrative. And then we have Namaste, which stands for the National Action for Mechanized Sanitation Ecosystem.
Okay, Namaste. I wouldn't immediately connect sanitation with social justice, but I'm guessing there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right to be curious. This scheme focuses on ensuring the safety, dignity, and sustainable livelihoods of sanitation workers in urban India, a group that's often overlooked and undervalued. It's a prime example of how social justice can be about uplifting those who are often invisible.
That's a really important point. Sometimes the most vulnerable members of society are the ones we see the least. Speaking of invisible, what about that SMILE scheme you mentioned earlier, the one focused on rehabilitating transgender individuals and those engaged in begging? That one really piqued my interest.
Yeah. Right. SMILE stands for Support for Marginalized Individuals for Livelihood and Enterprise. It's all about creating a begging-free India by providing these individuals with shelter counseling and vocational training, giving them a chance to earn a dignified living.
Okay, so it's about empowering them to break free from those cycles of poverty and exclusion. It sounds like a really ambitious undertaking.
It definitely is. As of November 2024, over 7,600 beggars had been identified under this scheme, and nearly 1,000 have been rehabilitated. That said, the challenge is immense.
Those numbers really highlight the scale of the issue. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but there must be other initiatives working towards social justice in India. What else is out there?
There are a couple more key schemes to discuss. Firstly, we have PM Dakesh Yojana, or Pradhan Mantri Dakshta Arkushalta Sampan Hitgrahi Yojana. This one focuses on economic empowerment through free skill training, targeting scheduled castes, other backward classes, economically backward classes, denotified and nomadic tribes, and Safai Karamkaris.
Skill development is so crucial for social mobility, giving people the tools to create a better future for themselves.
Absolutely. And last but not least, there is Nasha Muktarat Abhiyan, or NMBA, which aims to create a drug-free India. It tackles the issue from multiple angles: supply control through the Narcotics Control Bureau awareness and demand reduction, led by the MOSJE, and treatment through the Ministry of Health.
So it's a comprehensive approach to a complex problem, and it involves multiple ministries working together. It sounds like India is really tackling social justice on multiple fronts, from constitutional guarantees to targeted interventions.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot going on, and navigating this landscape can feel overwhelming, but I think it's crucial to remember that achieving social justice is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
That's a great way to put it. It's about continuous progress and adaptation.
Mm.
I'm curious, what do you think has been particularly effective or innovative in India's approach to social justice so far?
One of the things that impresses me the most is how India is combining constitutional provisions with targeted schemes to address the specific needs of different groups. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also makes me wonder if this multi-pronged approach is actually working.
Well, that's a question we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll take a closer look at the impact of these initiatives and what the evidence tells us. Welcome back to our deep dive into social justice in India.
We've laid the groundwork, exploring those constitutional provisions, government schemes, the challenges India faces.
Right.
But now let's get to the heart of it.
Yeah, let's measure the impact. Is there evidence that these schemes are actually making a difference? Are we seeing real progress on the ground?
Yeah. Are we seeing that progress?
It's a mixed bag, really. Some initiatives have shown, remarkable success, while others are still facing hurdles.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the successes, what's working well.
We'll take the PM Dax Yojana, for instance. It's had a demonstrable impact on employability among marginalized communities. The skills training provided through this scheme has opened doors to better job opportunities.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear. But can you give me a more concrete example? How has this scheme actually changed people's lives?
Absolutely. There are countless stories of individuals from marginalized communities who have transformed their lives through PM Dax. For example, I read about a young woman from a remote village in Odisha who received training in tailoring and garment making through the program. She was then able to set up her own small business and even provide employment to other women in her community.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's a reminder that social justice is about more than just numbers.
Right.
It's about creating opportunities and transforming lives. Are we seeing similar success stories with other schemes?
Definitely. The SMILE scheme, which we discussed earlier, has also made significant progress in rehabilitating transgender individuals and those engaged in begging. By providing shelter counseling and vocational training, the scheme aims to break the cycle of poverty and social exclusion.
I remember that statistic we mentioned earlier. Nearly 1,000 individuals have been rehabilitated under SMILE.
Yeah.
It might seem like a small number in the grand scheme of things, but those are 1,000 lives that have been positively impacted.
Exactly. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about restoring dignity and hope to those who have been marginalized for far too long. It's about giving them a chance to participate in society on their own terms.
So we're seeing some positive outcomes, but I imagine there are also areas where progress has been slower or more challenging.
Right.
Where are we seeing those roadblocks?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is implementation. Even with the best intentions, schemes can fall short if they're not executed effectively on the ground.
That makes sense. What factors contribute to these implementation challenges?
There are several factors at play: bureaucratic hurdles, lack of coordination between different agencies, insufficient funding, and even limited awareness among the target populations about the schemes available to them. And, of course, corruption and leakages can divert resources away from those who need them most.
It's so frustrating to think that corruption can undermine such crucial efforts. It highlights why transparency and accountability are so important.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another challenge: monitoring and evaluation. We need robust systems in place to track the progress of these schemes, assess their impact, and identify areas for improvement. Without proper evaluation, it's difficult to determine what's working and what needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, it's like trying to navigate without a compass. You need those feedback mechanisms to stay on course. What about the data? Are we effectively collecting and analyzing data to inform policy decisions?
Data collection and analysis are essential, but there's definitely room for improvement. We need more comprehensive and reliable data on the socioeconomic conditions of marginalized communities. This kind of data can help us understand the specific challenges they face and tailor interventions accordingly.
So it's about moving beyond broad brush strokes and getting granular with the data to create more targeted solutions.
Exactly, and this is where technology can play a transformative role by leveraging digital platforms and data analytics. We can enhance the reach, efficiency, and transparency of social justice initiatives.
Technology as a tool for social good. I like it, but let's not forget the human element. Are we effectively engaging with the communities we're trying to serve?
That's a crucial point. Top-down approaches often fail to address the nuanced needs of different communities. We need to ensure that the voices of those most affected by social injustice are heard, and that they're actively involved in shaping policies that impact their lives.
Right, it's about empowerment, not just handing out solutions. Okay, we've discussed the impact of existing initiatives, but what about the future? What are some emerging trends and challenges we need to be prepared for?
One of the biggest challenges we face is the rapidly evolving nature of work. Think automation, artificial intelligence. These forces are changing the job market as we know it. We need to anticipate these changes and equip marginalized communities with the skills they need to thrive in this new landscape.
So it's not just about addressing existing inequalities, but also about anticipating future challenges and preparing people for the jobs of tomorrow.
You got it. This requires a proactive approach, investing in education training and reskilling programs that are aligned with the demands of the future job market. We also need to address the digital divide, ensuring everyone has access to technology and the internet, which are increasingly essential for economic participation.
Yeah, digital inclusion is crucial. It's about making sure everyone has the opportunity to benefit from technological advancements. Yeah. Can't be a privilege for the few.
Absolutely. And we can't talk about the future of work without addressing climate change. The impacts of climate change are disproportionately felt by marginalized communities who are often the most vulnerable to extreme weather events and environmental degradation.
So climate justice becomes a crucial part of the social justice equation.
Exactly. It's about ensuring these communities are protected from the worst effects of climate change and that they have access to green jobs and sustainable livelihoods.
So what other emerging trends are shaping the landscape of social justice in India?
Well, urbanization is another major trend. As more and more people move to cities in search of opportunities, we need to ensure that urban planning and development prioritize social inclusion.
Okay, so thinking about affordable housing, accessible transportation, quality healthcare, and education for all, regardless of income or social background.
You're on the right track. It's about creating cities that work for everyone, not just the privileged few.
Cities designed with equity in mind. I like the sound of that. What else should we be paying attention to?
We can't ignore the impact of social media on social justice. It can be a powerful tool for raising awareness and mobilizing communities, but it can also be used to spread misinformation, hate speech, and discrimination.
Right, it's a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to promote digital literacy, critical thinking skills, and responsible online behavior. We also need to hold social media platforms accountable for the content they host, ensuring they're taking steps to combat hate speech and discrimination.
Okay, so navigating this complex landscape requires a multifaceted approach, but it sounds like India is at least moving in the right direction. What's your overall assessment of India's progress towards social justice?
I'm cautiously optimistic. India has a strong constitutional foundation for social justice, and the government has implemented a range of schemes to address inequalities. While implementation challenges remain, there's evidence that these initiatives are making a difference.
So there's reason to be hopeful, but we also need to stay vigilant and continue to push for progress.
Absolutely. Achieving social justice is an ongoing journey that requires the collective efforts of government, civil society, and individuals.
That brings us to a crucial question. What can we as individuals do to contribute to a more just and equitable society?
That's a great question, and one that we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll discuss some practical steps we can all take to make a difference.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've explored, the complexities of social justice in India, from those constitutional provisions to government schemes, success stories, persistent challenges. But now let's bring it home. What can we as individuals do to contribute to a more just and equitable society?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves. I think, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these issues.
Right.
But, it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
Right. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more just world.
Right.
So where do we even begin? What's the first step?
Well, I think the foundation is education. We need to educate ourselves about the various forms of social injustice, both, in India and globally. It's about understanding the root causes of inequality, discrimination, and marginalization, which is really, essential for developing effective solutions.
So it's about going beyond the headlines and really digging deeper. But with so much information out there, where do we even begin? What are some reliable sources for learning about these issues?
You're right, it can be overwhelming, but there are a wealth of resources available both online and offline. Start with reputable news sources, academic journals, documentaries, and books written by experts in the field.
Those are great starting points. But what about learning from the people who are most affected by these issues?
Absolutely. Don't underestimate the power of listening to the lived experiences of those who have faced social injustice firsthand. Their stories can be incredibly powerful and eye-opening.
Yeah, those firsthand accounts can really humanize these issues and make them feel more tangible. So education is key. What comes next? How do we move from awareness to action?
Once we have a deeper understanding, we can start challenging our own biases and prejudices. We all have unconscious biases. And, recognizing and actively working to unlearn them is a continuous process.
I think that's a really important point. It's about recognizing that we all have work to do internally before we can effectively advocate for change externally.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-reflection and growth. We can, examine our beliefs and assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives, and, be open to challenging our own comfort zones.
It's about being willing to get uncomfortable
Yeah.
and confront those deeply ingrained beliefs that we might not even be aware of. So we educate ourselves, we challenge our biases, and then how do we turn that knowledge into meaningful action?
There are so many ways to get involved. We can support organizations that are working on the ground to promote social justice, whether through volunteering our time, donating money, or simply raising awareness about their work.
So putting our money where our mouth is
Yeah.
and actively supporting those on the front lines of these issues.
Exactly. And we can also use our voices to advocate for change. This can involve, writing to our elected officials, signing petitions, participating in peaceful protests, or speaking up against injustice whenever we see it.
So it's about using our platforms, whatever they may be,
Yeah.
to amplify the voices of those who are often marginalized or silenced.
Precisely. And remember, advocacy comes in many forms. It can be as simple as having a conversation with a friend or family member about these issues or sharing an insightful article on social media. Every action, big or small, contributes to the movement.
It's about creating those ripples of awareness and action that can ultimately lead to meaningful change. But what about our everyday lives? Are there things we can do in our personal and professional spheres to promote social justice?
Absolutely. We can start by creating more inclusive environments in our workplaces, schools, and communities. This can mean challenging discriminatory practices, promoting diversity and representation, and fostering spaces where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued.
So it's about walking the talk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And we can also be more mindful consumers, supporting businesses committed to ethical practices, fair labor standards, and social responsibility.
Voting with our wallets and supporting those who align their business practices with our values. What a powerful concept.
It really is. And finally, I think it's important to remember the power of empathy and compassion in our interactions with others. We need to listen to different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them, and try to understand where people are coming from.
Yeah, building bridges, not walls. Creating those connections and fostering understanding, even when we have differences.
Well said. Social justice is about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background, identity, or circumstances. And that requires a collective effort from all of us.
What a powerful reminder. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the global context to India's specific initiatives and now to our individual roles in this movement. And it's clear that, this conversation is just the beginning.
It absolutely is. I hope this deep dive has, sparked a desire in our listeners to explore these issues, further engage in meaningful dialogues, and take action to create a more just and equitable world.
Couldn't agree more. And for all you UPSC aspirants out there, remember, social justice isn't just a topic for the exam, it's a call to action. To all our listeners, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any further questions or insights to share. And don't forget, all of the information we discussed today comes straight from the PIB, your go-to source for UPSC prep. Until next time, keep diving deep.